This is a demo of the Agreed escrow platform. Here, we're going to walk you through a simple transaction of Agreed, as well as display some of the additional features we offer. So the first step in creating a transaction is for someone to set up the transaction. In this case, we're going to set up the transaction as a seller. So first we sign in. As you can see, you log in straight into the dashboard. You can see that in this case, the seller already has transactions going. But we want to set up a new transaction, so we go here and click Start New Transaction. The seller is taken to set up a new escrow transaction page. One of the things we noticed through the process was that a lot of clients would get really confused about the escrow process, about what's going on or what step they're on. So what we did on Agreed is that for every single field, we provided contextual help. And the contextual help will follow them through every single step they take. For example, if I clicked on website for content, it'll tell me, well, what is this and what is this supposed to do? What is inspection period? What is website content details? Another thing we provided was the subway map on the right. The subway map will tell you exactly all the steps that are needed for the escrow process, exactly where you are in the escrow process, as well as what is left and what was already completed. Now let's go ahead and start a transaction. The first step is to fill in the transaction description. The next step is to select the item type for the transaction. There are two options here, website with content or just a domain. One thing to highlight with website with content is we display the inspection period because the buyer probably wants some time to look at the code, make sure everything is there that the seller promised. But when you select just a domain, we remove the inspection period because there's really nothing to inspect. Once the domain is transferred, that closes the transaction. This, we realized, made the transaction process a lot faster. For this demo, we're going to select domain as the item type. Next, we're going to fill out the domain that's going to be part of the transaction. Then we have to select the transaction type. You can choose between a lease or a sale. We're going to choose sale and continue. As mentioned in the beginning of this video, anybody can start a transaction. In my case, since I'm the seller, I'm going to select seller as my role. As you can see, once I selected seller, the proper fields that I have to fill out are displayed below. If you select other roles, the fields will change. For example, if I select the broker, now I have the option to put my broker commission in percentage or dollars, who pays the broker commission, confidentiality, and other fields. Now let's get back to me being the seller and continue through the demo. So the next step is for me to put in the buyer email address that's participating in the transaction. Now we continue to the next step. Next is the financial details of the transaction. As you can see, we support multiple currencies: the US dollar, the euro, the Australian dollar, the pound, the yen, and the Canadian dollar. You can also select no financing, which is a standard purchase, or purchase financing. If you select purchase financing, there are other fields you'll have to fill out. For example, payment frequency. How often are the payments? Are they going to be monthly, quarterly, yearly? How long are the financing terms? Optionally, you could put a down payment or a balloon payment. Next, you can select if the first payment comes at the date of the closing, or you can select a different start date. For example, some people like to select the 15th or the end of the month to pay all their payments. So if we wanted to make this a finance purchase, we'd fill out the fields above. First, we put in the item price. Then we'd want to say we want the payments monthly. Next, we fill out the length of the finance term. As you notice, once I type in the length of the financing term, a payment summary shows on the right. This shows how much each payment will be, as well as a breakdown of what the payment payouts will be. If I change the financing terms to say 12, the payment summary automatically updates with the actual payment amounts. As I add different options, the payment summary will also update. For example, if I put a down payment of, say, $500, You can see the first month's payment, and then the monthly payments are separated out into $917.17. Same thing if I add a balloon payment at the end. Say $1,000. As you can see, everything updates in this table dynamically. For the sake of this demo, we're just going to select a standard no financing payment. The next step is to decide who pays for the escrow fee. You can select buyer, seller, or do a 50-50 split. We'll have the buyer pay the escrow fee. This last step summarizes all the information we've entered above. It also includes general escrow instructions, as you can see here. If everything looks correct, all you have to do is click I agree to start the transaction. As you can see, you've successfully set up a new transaction. Now if you click to take me to my dashboard, you can see the status of the transaction under the All Transactions tab. At this point, the transaction has been created. Agreed then emails the buyer to let them know that the transaction has started, and they can log in through the email, or they could just come straight to the site and log in. For now, we're going to log in as the buyer. Once you're logged in, you're taken straight to the My Actions item, where you can see the transaction that we just created, and the next action you have to take, which is to review and agree. You're taken straight to the terms that were created from the seller. From here, you can review the terms as the buyer, and if you want to edit the terms if they were incorrect, you click on this edit button, and it'll allow you to edit the terms. In this case, we're just going to agree. Once the buyer has agreed, they can proceed to the next step, which is to send the payment. The buyer is now taken to the Payment tab, where they can see the payment overview. As you can see on the left of the subway map, you can see the current step we're at, which is buyer sends payment. From here, the buyer selects the payment method they want. As you can see, we've integrated Bitcoin and Litecoin as part of the payment process. They could also select wire, ACH, and paper check. You can see the Bitcoin implementation below. For this demo, we're going to select wire. Once we select wire, we provide them with the wire instructions and allow them to submit the payment method. At this point, once the payment has been submitted, it is up to Agree to verify that they received the payment. While Agreed is verifying payment, the seller can actually log in and select the payment method they wish to be paid out in. Agreed automatically displays previous payout options the seller has used in older transactions, in this case, ACH and check. The seller can also add a new payout method if they want. In this case, we're just going to select check. Once Agreed has verified the payment has been received, it'll push the transaction to the next phase, which is the transfer phase. As you can see, Agreed has already pushed this transaction into the transfer phase. The next step is for the buyer to provide the transfer information. We know the transfer process is probably the most confusing part of a domain transaction. So, to make things easier, Agreed pulls the whois information of the domain to find out where it is currently registered. Each registrar has different requirements to do a push transfer. So, depending on the registrar, we show what is needed to do a push. In this case, since the registrar is GoDaddy, GoDaddy only requires an email and the GoDaddy username or account number. So this is what we display. If it was a different registrar, we would display different inputs. In addition, we provide links to the help sections of each registrar that describes the transfer process to help the buyer along. If the buyer doesn't want to do a push transfer, we also allow them to transfer to a different registrar below, as you can see here. For the demo, we're going to do a push transfer. So let's fill out the information. Once the buyer has provided the transfer information, it is up to the seller to transfer the domain. As you can see here, the information that the buyer provided for the push is displayed here for the seller. The seller now goes to the registrar, initiates the push, and comes here to check this check mark to indicate that they've done the push. Once the seller has initiated the push, it is now up to the buyer to confirm that they received the domain. As you can see from the buyer's account, we show the date and the time the seller transferred the domain over. Once the buyer accepts the domain, they check this box to notify both the seller and agree that they've received the domain. As you can see through the subway map on the right, the last step is for Agreed to confirm that the transfer happened. Once Agreed confirms the transfer, the payout is made to the seller. Agreed has confirmed that the transfer has occurred, paid out the seller, and closed the transaction. This completes the escrow process. Once escrow is complete, the buyer can view their closing statements. As you can see, the buyer can now download their closing statement, their receipt, and their transaction details. The seller has similar documents that they could download in their account. You could also check on the right and you can see that the subway map is fully complete. There is also a transaction history of the dates and times of when each action occurred. Agreed also has an internal messaging system where the buyer or the seller can message either Agreed or everyone in the transaction. Agreed also has a notes section where you can add notes or reminders to either yourself or to everyone in the transaction. Agreed is also fully responsive, so you can do your transactions on your iPad, phone, or other mobile device. Agreed also offers APIs, so you can set up transactions and view details of specific transactions directly on your site. This completes our demo of Agreed.com. If you have any questions, just email us at support@agreed.com.